Welcome to this Azure Advent Calendar session on Azure Security and the Best Practices. My name is Gareth Jones. I'm a Microsoft Certified Trainer and Regional Lead, and I'm also an MVP in Azure. My day job is I'm the CEO of GoDeploy, which is an online lab hosting provider for Microsoft and other vendors. Regardless if you're an IT professional, technical architect or developer, Azure Security is critical. And therefore in this session we're going to be discussing some of the best practices around Azure Security. But first, let's look at the security landscape and some of the cloud challenges we have. From a cloud security perspective, management is without doubt increasingly distributed, whether that's using multiple vendors or if we're connected from our on-premises environment into Azure, for example. Cloud environments are more dynamic. It enables us to deploy resources at a much faster pace than we've ever been able to do. And we do need a new approach. If we think about Azure as a Christmas present that's sat under the tree, we can go and rip off the wrapping paper, and inside of that is all of these resources available for us to use straight away. So we really have to take this new approach. So for a second, let's start thinking like an attacker. How cheap is it for me to actually attack your environment? Well, on this slide you can see the average price per month to use a certain modality, and lots of them are really cheap. However, one that's not so cheap is the 0-day. We don't tend to see 0-day attacks. It's as common as maybe they used to be. And people ultimately think there's, that 0 days are the things that get attackers in the door, and that's not strictly true. They will, of course, help, but they cost a lot of money. And that's as you can see on the slide, that's the average price over all kinds of 0 days, and that's not just what it costs for a particular Windows or iOS vulnerability. It's just an average. So how can we mitigate some of these attacks? Well, we need to focus on hygiene, not particularly 0 days. So kind of being preventative rather than reactive. And they're expensive, like we've already mentioned. So managing our environments and ensuring they're up to date, they're patched, identify vulnerabilities, and being monitored and using and leveraging the resources that we've got available to us built into Azure, which we'll see later on in this presentation. That is really what's going to help us. But also focusing on multi-factor authentication and password, and the zero trust model is critical as well. And attackers have really moved into kind of identity attacks and phishing. And based on that, if we don't have administrators with MFA or passwordless authentication, then really we're going to struggle. And the attackers have really got an easy mechanism to attack those environments we have hosted in Azure. And then from a denial of service perspective, if we actually look at the previous slide, the DDoS attacks are actually one of the cheapest we can do. For $700, $800 per month, they can take down a critical workload or a critical website that's hosted in potentially a cloud service. So taking that into consideration, my first best practice is to always think zero trust. So gone are the days really when security focused on a strong perimeter network and defense to keep malicious hackers out. An organization called Forrester Research introduced the zero trust model, which states essentially that you should never assume trust, but continually validate trust. And there are three guiding principles of the zero trust model, and the first is explicitly verify, use least privilege access, and always assume there is a breach. So, like we mentioned, the traditional perimeter network defense kind of model is obsolete. Perimeter-based networks operate really on the assumption that all systems within the network are trusted. However, today's increasingly diverse and complex and cloud environments and the migration towards the cloud services make perimeter security controls irrelevant. So networks that actually fail to evolve from those traditional defenses are now going to be vulnerable to breaches. An attacker can compromise a single endpoint within a trusted boundary and then quickly expand foothold across the entire network. Whereas zero trust networks eliminate that concept of trust based on network location within a perimeter, and instead zero trust architectures leverage the device and user trust claims to gate access to those organizational data and resources. So a general zero trust network model typically includes the identity provider to keep track of the users and user related information, a device directory that maintains a list of devices that have access to corporate resources, along with the corresponding device information, things like device type or the integrity, a policy evaluation service to determine if a user or device conforms to the policy set by security administrators or security departments, and then an access policy which utilizes the above signals to grant or deny access to a particular organizational resource. So if we think about, if we use the scenario of a web application that we host or we've just deployed in Azure, that web application by default will have a public URL, and we can access that publicly on the internet. So how could we secure that using the zero trust model, kind of with an Azure network, from an Azure networking perspective? Well, we could put that web application in an application isolated environment inside a virtual network, secure that with network security groups, put it behind a load balancer with denial of service protection. But on top of that, we could publish it via using an Azure firewall or an Azure web application firewall. So this is how we get that defense in depth and the zero trust model by using the different components we have available to us. So really we just need to keep that zero trust model in our minds when we're architecting or deploying resources inside of Azure. My second best practice is all around secure score. With so many services offering security benefits, it's hard to often know what steps to take first to secure and harden those workloads. The Azure Secure Score actually reviews and gives you security recommendations and prioritizes them as well, so you know which recommendations to perform first. And this helps you find the most serious security vulnerabilities, for example, a public IP address associated to a virtual machine. And Secure Score is essentially a tool that helps you access your or you assess your workloads and security posture. So essentially what the Security Center and the Secure Score is doing and how the calculation works, it's actually doing the work of a security analyst for you automatically. So it reviews or gives you the recommendations, and using advanced algorithms, it determines how crucial each recommendation is based on those algorithms. And it constantly reviews and then gives you active recommendations and calculates your score based on them. So let's take a look at Azure Secure Score. So here I am inside the portal, and if we navigate to the Security Center and on the overview blade, we can see I have a secure score of 245 out of 340. And we can see here some of the security hygiene. I've got some high severity recommendations. So let's go and have a look at my secure score and see what these recommendations are. So if now I've selected the secure score dashboard, we can see if I had multiple subscriptions, they would all be displayed here, but I've only got one. So let's go and drill down into my Azure Pass sponsorship subscription, I should say. And we can see a multi-factor authentication should be enabled on accounts with owner permissions to your subscription. Yeah, agreed. So now I could go, if I click on this recommendation, we can see the impact will increase my score by 50. And we can see the unhealthy resources. Again, if I had multiple subscriptions, some of them did have MFA enabled and some didn't. Obviously, they wouldn't be displayed. But let's just return back to the recommendations. We can see here, vulnerability assessment should be enabled on your SQL servers. And we've got this button here to quick fix. And this will automatically remediate any issues that we actually have with my resources deployed inside of Azure. So Secure Score and the Security Center is kind of your best friend from a security standpoint, And like I just said, it is doing this in the background automatically for us. We don't have to do anything. It will just analyze all the resources that we have and give us recommendations. Again, some of these we may be aware of, and we don't want to implement them for a particular reason we have. And again, we can mute some of these recommendations if necessary. So the main key point here to take away is to operationalize the secure score. And what do we need to do? Well, essentially assign stakeholders that are going to use the secure score in the security center to monitor that risk and improve our security posture in general. And this will enable us to rapidly identify and remediate any kind of security hygiene. If we think back to that zero trust model, that's pretty important. And especially we need to set up a regular cadence, to review this and make sure we plan those initiatives with the idea of improving that. And essentially you can gamify the activity if possible to increase engagement and make it a little bit more fun. And there's really just some suggested process owners there for you to take away. My next best practice is really administration, and this is kind of critical. There's no ifs and buts around this. This is kind of a must do, and the whole idea is require all admins, global admins, to be passwordless, which is preferred, or at least require multi-factor authentication. And this integrated with privileged identity management and just-in-time administration and just-in-time access is pretty important. We've already established passwords really cannot protect against accounts and common attacks. And there's kind of an interesting link there to an X-Ignite video. And how can we achieve this? Well, using things like Windows Hello, using the Authenticator app on our smartphones, using multi-factor authentication if you want, or even integrating into a third-party MFA solution. And just note, text messaging is now relatively inexpensive, so SMSs are relatively cheap. However, one big caveat here is kind of always ensure we have a break glass account, and that's in case there is maybe an outage of one of these services that we're using to have this authentication or additional authentication mechanism. We need an account which we can essentially get access to, which doesn't have this authentication enabled on it, in order for us to be able to maybe turn off MFA for a period of time if there was an outage, for example. So just make sure we have a break glass account. Okay, my fourth and final best practice in this session is enterprise segmentation. So really trying to align everybody in our organization to deploy resources in the same way into Azure and segment them into separate kind of environments, as you'll see. So this is a reference that you can use either to start your design process or compare it to existing design that you may already have. And the enterprise-wide resources include the enterprise enrollment, or what we refer to realistically as a tenant or subscription in Azure, and the enterprise directory in Azure AD, and we have a root management group, which is a group of subscriptions. It's recommended that you use really a single Azure tenant. Though obviously we understand that many customers have multiple tenants due to organic use of Azure, and that may include developers using their Visual Studio credit inside of Azure, and maybe somebody signed up for a free trial, etc. Or we've separated our enterprise agreement into multiple subscriptions. But Azure AD provides a unified identity for Azure as well, via and including our on-premises resources via Active Directory and third-party integrations as well, using business-to-business Azure Active Directory. But the segmentation model is strategically set at the high level, the management groups, to ensure that all layers realistically are aligned to it. And most on-prem environments suffered from operational and security issues because segmentation approaches were separately designed and then implemented by networking teams and application teams and identity teams that really all conflicted with each other, and realistically ended up in security and firewall exceptions that maybe didn't really realistically need to be there. But most organizations realistically have got a common shared services, or have a set of common shared services that are used across the enterprise. And additional segments can be identified by the organizational to meet those requirements or needs. So all of the permissions assigned to a management group will be, let's just build this up. Yeah, so all our permissions assigned to the management group will be inherited by the subscriptions within it. And remember, a management group is effectively a group of subscriptions. And this gives us that flexibility for a single subscription or multiple subscriptions within a particular segment. Although, like I mentioned, it's recommended that you limit the number of subscriptions actually needed, unless there's a specific business case, because it just makes management and configuration more complex. And there's a number of valid approaches to designing the segmentation model, depending on the organization's structure, culture, their businesses or their industry, and the operational model, and some other factors, multiple application segments, maybe aligned to a particular business unit or organizational function or risk profile, and maybe include legacy applications, single application segments for applications with a unique risk or operational profiles, maybe they're high value or high impact or risk, again, or legacy application. And then we can also have development stage segments for separating dev, test, and production environments. And setting the segmentation model at top level helps to naturally align our networks and applications to a unified approach, so we're all kind of using the same resources and making sure we're keeping that security model similar across each of those individual segments. And it ensures all these teams are aligned to that single model directly. So the whole idea is to really identify security segments that are needed, and it gives us a clear and simple segmentation strategy which enables our stakeholders to understand and support it. So hopefully it reduces the risk of human error and automation failures that we've got. And select the segmentation approaches from the design reference and assign the permissions and network controls as are applicable to your particular business or organization. And GRC, which is governance, risk, and compliance from a segmentation perspective, it enables, really reduces that friction between our maybe development team and operations team. So also contains the risk, reduces that attack surface essentially across those multiple segments, and monitoring it operationally for potential violations. So rather than having thousands of different virtual networks kind of all peered together, and that may be what you require in your organization, but essentially we can monitor much less and achieve much more with a good segmentation approach. So some of the key takeaways for this session, really, I can't say it enough, embrace that zero trust networking model. We no longer work in that WAN, DMZ, LAN kind of scenario, and segment that network and create these micro perimeters using things like Azure firewalls, network security groups, and use the secure score and the security center to your advantage. It's kind of it's an extra person that is doing operational management and watching your Azure environment without any real cost aligned to that. But thanks for watching. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas and a great 2020, and let's look forward to more exciting features and releases in Azure over the next year. Thank you very much.